So fun fact about making soap from scratch, in Singapore, you cannot actually do it freely. The chemical that you have to use, which is lye, is not freely accessible. You have to go to a regulated soap studio, which may not sound the most appealing, but the specific one I go to is pretty comfy and homely. They have a wide variety of ingredients and tools provided, but you can bring your own from home, and generally it's a very nice environment to be creating some soap in. So here's a quick overview of my usual setup. We'll get into more detail along the way, but I have some bowls and pouring jugs prepared, as well as spatulas and spoons, stick blenders, which you'll see why in a moment, colorants, fragrances and oils, and most importantly, safety gear, which includes goggles and gloves. To start, you want to prepare all of your ingredients, and it's almost like baking in a sense where you get everything measured out so that things run smoothly. The soap we're making today is known as cold process soap, where the soap is made from scratch using oils and lye. The oils that you can use are just typical oils you'd normally find, like coconut oil, olive oil, and for soap bars you'll be using sodium hydroxide as the lye. For some of these oils and butters that you use, they need to be melted down. So in the studio's case, we have a hot water bath that we're going to be placing these solid oils in. You can do it in the microwave as well. For oils that are already liquid, you're just going to measure them and set them aside. And once the solid oils or butters are melted, you add them to the same batch. Once that is done, you're going to warm the entire batch of oils until a desired temperature. You also want to measure out your colorants and fragrances, making sure that they are skin safe and suitable for use in soap making. The reason why is because during the soap making process, the chemicals involved can be pretty harsh, and not all colorants and fragrances are going to survive that process. Next up, you want to measure out some water. This will be used to dissolve the lye and create a lye solution. You want to use distilled water for this because tap water may have metals or other contaminants. Finally, safety gear on now because we are going to be measuring out the final ingredient, which is the lye. Now the reason why safety gear is crucial from this point onwards is because lye is a corrosive and you want to protect yourself at all times. So long sleeves, gloves, safety goggles, keep pets and kids away, and covered shoes as well. The containers you're using for all of your soap making should also not be from aluminum, as lye will react with it. So go for something that is more like glass or stainless steel. Now once you have your lye and water measured, you're going to create your lye solution by adding your lye to the water a little bit at a time and ensure that it is fully dissolved. Now you can see the tiny grains that are still left in this jug, so you want to keep stirring, make sure that it is all dissolved, because undissolved lye can cause skin irritation in the final soap. Crucially, always add lye to your water and not water to your lye, because that will ensure that the concentration of lye in the water is safe. Once all of the lye is dissolved, you want to cool down the lye water solution in an ice bath until the temperature is pretty much the same as your oil. And that's all of our ingredients done. Let's move on to the fun part. To make soap, we have to combine the oils and lye in order to kickstart a process known as saponification. So this is where the oil and lye chemically combine to create a byproduct, which is soap. Traditionally, you'd whisk it, but we're going to be using a stick blender to speed up this process. So make sure you burp the blender by tapping it at an angle to release air bubbles. That way we're not incorporating too much bubbles into the soap itself. Then we shall begin by pouring the lye water against the shaft in a slow, steady stream. Again, this is just to minimize bubbles. You want to mix it by hand a little bit before turning the stick blender on. And as the mixture blends, it will start to form this creamy, emulsified looking mixture. And as you blend further, it will reach varying levels of trace. So trace refers to the tracings if you were to use a spatula and drip batter down. And it can range from light to heavy depending on what you aim for with your designs. Different levels of trace will have different use cases. For example, if you want a flat layer of soap, light traces are good. If you want to hold textures in your designs, heavy traces will be good. Design-wise, the overall theme of the soap can be up to you. For me, I'm creating this soap for my brand Mornington House, and the overall theme of this soap for me was to create a visualization of the nature that surrounds Mornington House. I went for an ombre effect to represent the gradients of sunrise. And the fragrances that I'm choosing for my line are based more upon nature theme scents. So we've got grapefruit, we've got an earthy bay leaf and herb scent, and we also have a sea salt scent. You want to divide the batter into your relevant portions, and then this is where you can have fun adding colorants and fragrances. Just remember that anything you add to the soap can affect its trace. Certain fragrances might cause your trace to accelerate and make the overall batter thicker, some might loosen it and make it thinner. The important thing is trial and error, and practice is key to learn how your specific recipe behaves and how you can troubleshoot it if something goes wrong. The soap instructors at my studio fully witnessed the months that it took for me to figure out my recipe. Colorants can also change over time, so what may look perfectly vibrant right now may fade and turn into a different color over time, so these are all important things to test. For my ombre design, I tend to go with a medium trace because I need the batter to be thick enough to suspend the next layer while still allowing it to flow into an even layer so as to not have air bubbles in the actual soap design. And it's very much freeform, like I'm not being overly precise with the exact waviness, it's sort of organic and free-flowing, and I think that's just representative of the way I create. So while I'm creating the design, I thought we'd touch on a few different points about saponification, especially if you're new to cold process soap making. The first question revolves around concerns about the use of lye in a soap and how these chemicals are used in things like drain cleaners and really harsh applications. How each specific chemical is used in a very different use case can ultimately determine whether something is gentle or harsh. In this case, all of the lye is used up in the saponification process. No lye is left behind once the soap is created, and the soap itself is actually the byproduct of this process. That comes from a lot of work soap makers do to create a recipe that is well balanced and ensures that it is safe to use. When formulating recipes, soap makers also usually leave a little bit of extra oil in the soap, so while all of the lye may get used up, the leftover oil is actually one way to add extra nourishment and a sort of gentle feeling when you use the soap. The next question revolves around why soap needs to sit and cure for such a long time. There are a few reasons to this. The main one is that the water that you saw in the lye solution earlier is actually just serving as a carrier for the lye in order to better incorporate it with the oil. So one of the reasons we cure soap for 4 to 6 weeks at a time is to allow the water to slowly evaporate from the soap to create a firmer, longer lasting bar. Depending on the formulation of your recipe, there may be more or less water, but ultimately, you would still need some time to allow the soap to cure and release most of that extra water. So it's not that you can't use the soap before the 4 to 6 weeks are up, but the thing is, saponification is technically complete enough by about the 3-day mark, like most of the process is complete. You could use it, but it will be a relatively harsh bar of soap. So the cure time also allows the final few percent of the process to complete, and it leaves a more gentle bar of soap in the end. Now when it comes to costs of cold processed soap, obviously it's not going to be as cheap as a detergent based soap, and the bulk of that reason really just comes down to the cost of the ingredients that are used. As you saw from the making of this soap, oil is one of the key ingredients when you create soap in this way, and depending on the types of oil you use, especially if it's specialty kind of oils, those get expensive, and with the amounts that we're using to create the soap, the prices just add up, unfortunately. There is ultimately also value in something being a handcrafted good, and the nature of an indie craft being made in such small batches also means that the cost of goods unfortunately is higher than if you were to make it in a factory. Value is ultimately subjective, but buying from indie makers is actually one way of supporting their craft and allowing them to continue making things, despite them being more expensive than factory-made options, because ultimately you end up with a higher quality, more intentionally made product. For me, honestly, one of the motivations I got into soap making was that it is just such a fascinating craft. To see something get created from nothing is such a satisfying experience. It is such a mesmerizing texture when it's in its soap batter form. It's also one of those forms of art that is usable, like you get to use the final product. So you want to leave your completed soap to set for about a week before you cut it, and then allow it to cure for a few more weeks. And this is what my soaps look like, so I'm looking forward to having these ready for when we do a product drop for Mornington House. If you'd like to see more videos on soap making, please let me know in the comments below. What was your favorite part about the soap making process, and what questions do you have about it? Let me know as well. And thanks for watching this video, I'll see you next time.